What would you do if you were driving down the road late one night and you saw something that made you sick to your stomach? Ugh. But not in a gross or disgusting way. No, something so paranormal you want to you want to throw up. Now that's a paranormal story. Get out of here, lame-o ghosts. If you don't make me sick to the stomach, I don't want to see you. And then we take a trip with a pizza delivery driver making his rounds one night. Little does he know he's about to come face to face with a beast from beyond. But does this terrifying creature actually hold the answer to why we see the paranormal? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio.
I'm a little freaked out. Actually, I'm a lot freaked out.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys had an awesome Halloween and got all the candy that you wanted. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first off, returning into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for Andrea. Woohoo, yeah, wee! Haha, yeah, she's doing cartwheels all around, knocking over all of our Halloween candy. I was like, no, we had that separated by deliciousness. Now my Snickers are mixed in with my Twizzlers. Ugh. Andrea, she's been spreading the word about the show Dead Rabbit Radio. Her birthday's coming up, so it's a perfect time to give her a salute and say thanks, Andrea, for getting the word out. If you guys can't support the show financially, do what Andrea did. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Andrea, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit dirigible. Everyone climb on board this big, beautiful blimp. As Andrea fires it up, she had a horrible steam accident with the Jason Jalopy last time she was on the show, but today everything's going much more smoothly. Everyone climb aboard this dirigible. We're leaving behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Andrea, why don't you fly us all the way out to Arizona? We're about to meet two young men. We're going to call them Ben, is the narrator. He's the guy who posted this story. And then we'll call his friend Carl. We don't have their exact names, but they're currently in the back of a pickup truck. They're kids. Someone else is driving them around. It's December because they're doing this thing called the 12 Days of Christmas, where it's ding dong ditch. So kids run up and ring the doorbell or knock on the door and then they run away. Super irritating. I hate that. I mean, now that I've said that, everyone's like, oh, now I know what I'm going to do for Jason for Christmas. I'm going to bang on his door. Ding dong ditch, but this is good. This is a good ding dong ditch. So what happens is you're sitting there, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, you're watching MASH or whatever you're watching. And then all of a sudden, someone knocks on your door, almost gives you a heart attack, right? You don't expect anyone to be banging on your door at 8 p.m. And then you answer the door, you look out first, right? You have your little peephole, you look out, you don't see anyone, and you're like, huh? And then you open the door, and instead of kids laughing in the bushes, there's a little present. I mean, here's the thing, man. You got to be pretty ballsy. All of a sudden, it's middle of the night. Or not middle of the night. It's 8, 9 p.m. People don't knock on doors that late. You don't see anyone out there. You see a wrapped present. I mean, that sounds like something Joker would do. I'd be like, oh, I don't know about this. It's a purple wrapping paper with a green bow. No, I'm good. And it's a Christmas theme ding dong ditch where they give you presents. Still irritating. Still super irritating. I don't care what's in that bag or box. I'd be kind of mad that I had to get up out of my chair. And I'd have been like, why you? And I'd be shaking my fist as I'm opening the box. It's eternal joy. I was like, I don't know. I'm still mad. Anyways, they're doing this ding dong ditch late at night. The truck is driving in this neighborhood that's outside of the town that they live in. It's the suburbs. And the way that it's set up in Arizona is the suburbs. You have a city and then the suburbs and then desert forever. Just a vast wasteland of cacti, armadillos, It may be a plateau. If you got a telescope, you could see a plateau somewhere out there. So it's not like a normal place, right? Where the suburbs are just neighboring in other suburbs and it kind of goes on this immortal city, aka Cyberpunk 2049. It's just all built on top of each other. No, the neighborhood they're in actually borders the desert. It's just dark desert outside of this little housing development. Well, anyways, this pickup truck, they're being chased by people. People are throwing the presents back in. They're like, take this, you idiot. You woke me up. They're like, oh, we're getting our gifts back. This is more successful than possible. We can knock on double the amount of doors now. The truck is driving through this housing division, and it gets to a cul-de-sac. And Carl and Ben are sitting in the back of the pickup truck, and they have no control over the situation, right? They're just sitting there chatting. And they look and they see that as this truck is pulling into this cul-de-sac, they see at the end of this dead end, there's a street light. And in the beam of light, like a little circle that Jason, I know how light works. You know what I mean? Like the illuminated area underneath the street lamp, whatever you want to call it. There's a man crouched down. And Ben is thinking, oh, wow, that's interesting. It must be some homeless man. That must be a bum crouched down underneath the streetlight. He's about to do a little dance. I mean, when's the last time you saw someone crouched underneath the streetlight? It wasn't about to mug you. I think that's also probably why he's thinking, it's like, oh, that might be a homeless guy. Or getting ready for a dance routine. But he goes, it's weird that it would be a homeless guy because we're outside of the city. Like, there's not a lot of homeless people in the suburbs. Because there's not much to do. You're all hella bored. You're like, this is lame. I'm going to go to the stabbing capital of the state. I'm going to head back into Prescott or what are the other cities there? Toby. Famous Toby, Arizona. Phoenix is what I was looking for. It's odder to find homeless people in the suburbs because there's not a lot of places to panhandle. There's not a lot of places to congregate, to stab. So he thought that was weird. What's this homeless man doing out here in the suburbs? And the man is crouched down. Totally crouched down. And Ben, the truck is like slowly driving towards this guy. Again, Ben and Carl have no control over it. It's almost like a Disneyland ride, right? Where the chances of you getting stabbed in the eyeball is 50-50. The truck's moving closer to this man who's crouched down, and as it's getting closer, despite the fact that this light is shining perfectly on this dude, Ben realizes you can't make out any details. You can't see his face, you can't see like his jacket or his pants. It's just like this silhouette. You can't make out any particular details to him. The truck drives by the cul-de-sac, it drives by the silhouetted man, and even though they're close to this point, neither Ben nor Carl can see any detail. It just almost looks like a cutout. A pitch black cutout. But now that the truck is driving away, Ben and Carl turn and they look and they're seeing this black silhouette crouched down underneath the streetlight. The man then stands up. The homeless man stands up, or supposed homeless man. They really don't know how to define him up until this point. After this point, they're going to have a word for him. The man stands up and then walks away. But what Ben and Carl see chill them to the bone. Because this man walks away in two opposite directions. He went from being the silhouette of one man to two men. He's now two men walking out in separate directions. And it was so jarring for Ben and Carl to see. Ben, I thought this was an interesting word. He said he felt a quote-unquote ugly dread in his stomach. Like beyond nauseous, beyond queasy, or any other adjective for nausea. He said it felt ugly. Something primal inside of him was on red alert. He had just seen something that not only should he have never seen, this thing was dangerous. Like on a primal level, dangerous to humanity. He saw something that dark, that powerful underneath that streetlight. Ben turns to Carl, because him and Carl both saw the silhouette underneath the lamp. He turns to Carl because he wants to ask, dude, did you see that? That guy walked in two different directions at the same time. Like, what in the world was that? Ben turns to Carl and says, did you see that? Did you just see what happened? And before he could say any more, Carl just looked down and said, I need to go home right now. They didn't say, Ben didn't specifically say that they went home after that. He's like, what? Carl, come on, man. We got all these more presents to deliver. He's like, Carl's freaking out. I've seen the inhuman face of paranormal evil. And you're like all walking up to houses with the Christmas gift sheets covered in your sweat. You're like, I'm so terrified. He didn't say whether or not they ended their Ding Dong Ditch game that night. I will assume so. It's kind of hard to be in the festive spirit when you've seen something like this. Now, Ben says that his friend Carl is indigenous. He's Navajo. He's a member of the Navajo tribe, because they talked about this later on. Carl goes, what we saw was what he believed. This is Carl's theory about what they saw that night, was a Ni-Yaldalushi, which in general meaning would be skinwalker. It's not the exact translation, but kind of speaking of the same thing. Now, what's interesting is, you go, well, that's not a skinwalker. Skinwalkers are those tall, white, gangly things that are walking around on all fours. Skinwalkers are the things that appear in the creepypastas, imitating people's voices and all that stuff. I tend not to use the word skinwalker on this podcast because I don't believe it's used correctly a lot of the time. The tall, white, gangly things, I saw one of them. I didn't know what it was. I don't even know if I classified it as paranormal at the time. I mean, it was something weird. I'll put that episode in the show notes. Those are generally referred to as crawlers. The things copying you and speaking of your voice and kind of distorting reality, those are generally referred to as mimics. The term skinwalker at some point kind of got bastardized to mean both or even just one of those. And I'm not trying to lecture anybody, but I have made a concentrated effort not to use the term skinwalker on the show because I knew that was not the right term. A skinwalker was something completely different. It's interesting because when you look at the Navajo stories, a skinwalker is a witch, for lack of a better term. It's basically a human who has the power to either possess animals or become animals. They can also possess humans. They are almost always classified as evil. The term anti-healer is used, which, I mean, I didn't know there was an anti-heal. I thought there was heal and just wound, destroy. But basically, like a medicine man or a medicine woman who is out to curse people, out to destroy people. Yeah, Yi Nandalushi does not translate to skinwalker. So to everyone who put in that into the YouTube comments, I am correcting that. Yi Nandalushi means, quote, by means of it, it goes on all fours, unquote. So like if you were possessing an animal. And it's interesting because the Navajo Nation does see these skinwalker stories going around, and they're like, oh, I was this thing in the woods and it smelled like wet pennies and it was imitating my best friend Bart, but then I remembered my best friend Bart didn't come on the trip, and he started speaking in this stuttering voice going, hey, let me in. Let me in. Let me in. You're like, okay, we get it. You're a demon from beyond. You can stop standing outside all creepy, outside of the cabin. Take a bath. You smell like wet pennies. A lot of times those are called skinwalkers. The crawlers are called skinwalkers. And to the people of the Navajo Nation, they're like, those aren't skinwalkers. And when people go, okay, well then what is a skinwalker? Like, what is your definition of a skinwalker? Members of the Navajo tribe go, we're not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you. And there actually is a content, like the information, the little bit of information that I got on actually like what is a skinwalker according to the Navajo. It's a couple paragraphs on Wikipedia. It's not much. But you think about it, this is a tradition that's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years old. The Navajo Nation goes, context is everything. There's not facts we can tell you about a skinwalker. Even though this podcast host just read out 3 of them, they go, context is everything. There's not a YouTube video I can show you. There's not like a book you can buy. It's all about what they're capable of, who they are, how they interact with us. And this story has to weave into this story, and this precedent goes down here. And we're not going to tell you, because we know if we tell you a particular skinwalker story, there will be a YouTube video on it or podcast that will butcher it. And then there'll be 10 YouTube videos after that butcher the butchering. And then eventually you just have skinwalkers smelling like wet pennies out in the forest again. So it's very, very interesting that for the most part, people of the Navajo tribe, they're like, we're not going to tell you. We're not going to give you a bunch of fun facts about skinwalkers. This is a serious thing. They're real, right? They're evil, they're possessing people, they're standing underneath streetlights, they're driving children mad. We don't want you to cover this stuff. And it's funny because it was kind of the same thing with that Kanaima, that cryptid we covered last week from Guyana. That this shape-shifting monster made out of pure revenge had access to this poison. And the people in Guyana do not show the poisonous plant to Westerners because they said, you'll make an antidote. You'll make an antidote, and this is our way of life. The Kanaima must be summoned if you can't get vengeance any other way. And it has to use this plant. So it does make sense that you would have people being like, we're just not going to tell you. We're just not going to tell you because you guys are just going to mess it up anyways. So, very, very interesting. You go, okay, Jason, so that's an interesting story. Putting words in your mouth, I'm all making you act like a puppet. Jason, that was an interesting story. And wow, you're so handsome today. Thank you. But is it a one-off? That is something that we look at with stories of the paranormal. I found these. Let's go ahead and look at these 2 stories here. We are leaving behind Arizona. I don't know where this story took place, but we're about to meet a young woman. Let's call her Jenny. Jenny is leaving this Taco Bell, and she is headed out with her sister and 3 of their girlfriends. They're driving around town. She's driving back from a Taco Bell. This is how all great stories of paranormal suspense begin. Even Edgar Allan Poe won't resist the Taco Bell reference. Now, they were headed to a friend's house that was opposite of a large field. A large empty field. It's nighttime, too. Did I say that? You're all imagining broad daylight kids are flying kites? Nope. Super spooky. It's nighttime. They're driving away from a Taco Bell. Jenny's driving with her friends. And on the side of the street where this empty field is at, they see all of these street lights. You know, typical safety. I think the world should have more street lights, not less. And as they're driving towards this area, they see underneath one of these street lights a little girl. She's standing directly underneath the streetlight. She's completely illuminated. And unlike the last story, Jenny goes, I saw everything about her. She was blonde hair. She had pigtails. She was wearing a cute little blue dress. And as Jenny is driving there, and all of her friends are seeing this as well, they're like, what in the world? Like, what's this little girl doing out late at night? They don't recognize her as someone in the area. What's she doing just standing there? They drive past the girl. They don't stop to ask. They're like, oh, we got all this Taco Bell. We can move it. And then she have room to sit down. But no, let's keep our Taco Bell bag here with a seatbelt around it. They drive by the little girl. They don't pick her up. But after they drive by, Jenny turns and she looks back at the little girl. The little girl is gone. But in her place, exactly standing where she was previously standing, is a dog. And the dog immediately turned and ran off into the empty field. Now, Jenny and all of her passengers, they had all seen the little girl because they're driving towards her and they were thinking, what in the world, what's she doing up? Or even out this late? Jenny turns and she looks and she sees the girl gone, now replaced with a dog that then runs into the empty field. And at least two of her friends, her sister and then one of the other friends, had also turned around and seen the dog instead of the little girl, and the dog runs away. So they all saw it. Not all of them. There's 5 of them. All 5 saw the girl. 3 of them saw the dog after they passed it. You're all drawing a map. You're like, could you explain this stuff a little more succinctly? You're like, boss is like, shouldn't you be working on those reports? You're like, I got more important. You have a picture drawn. It's all empty field. Picture of a little girl and then a question mark dog. Boss is like, what are you doing? You can't listen to podcasts at work anymore. The point is that the girl turned into a dog and then ran away. Now, at this point, you're thinking, well, Jason, maybe there were 2 guys in the first story crouched down. Maybe they were whispering to each other. And they didn't see the other guy. That would explain why you didn't get any details. Because we all know if 2 people stand next to each other, they kind of wash out, right? You're like, is that guy wearing corduroy shirt or cotton? I can't tell. There's someone standing next to him. You go, Jason, maybe there was 2 people. Maybe it was a homeless group. Maybe it's, like a reunion or something. They're like, hey, we used to live in that same cardboard box together. Maybe they were playing craps. Maybe they were rolling dice. Maybe they were taking craps. It could have been a whole bunch of things. And then 2 guys just stood up and walked away. And this, maybe it was never a girl. Maybe it was always a dog in a dress with blonde pigtails. Like maybe, because they're driving, it's late at night. And Jenny goes, we were completely sober. She goes, 100% we were all sober. Listen, when you eat Taco Bell at night, there's 2 types of people who eat Taco Bell at night. People who work longest shifts and don't have time to cook, and they're usually buying it between 7 and 9. Anytime after 9 p.m., if you're buying Taco Bell, you're probably not 100% sober. But she swears that she and her friends were. Okay, you go, Jason, I think those are probably just mistakes. It's probably just 2 bums rolling dice on the ground in the middle of nowhere. You're like the worst skeptic ever. The second one was just a beautiful dog with ponytail or pigtails, whatever that dog had. Well, let's take a look at this one. We have a story of 2 people. We'll call the guy Tony and his friend. They're walking down the street. And they're walking down this long road, and they can actually see it's a long, long road, about a half mile down the road. You're like, Jason, these people just can't see. These people can't see. They only glasses. Maybe that's the answer to it. Yeah, one day I was flying in an airplane. I think I saw Cryptid 30,000 feet below me. These guys, they're walking down this street late at night. Street lights are on. They're looking down the road. They got about a half mile, but they see this street light, this particular street light. They see a kid standing underneath it. And they're like, that's creepy, right? Like, this is almost something you'd see in a horror movie. Like, why is there a little kid out at night, a half mile away? You're like, this is like the longest buildup ever for a horror movie. You're like, oh, I gotta walk all the way over there. Let's just hitchhike instead. Get hitchhiked by a serial killer. They're walking and they see this boy way far ahead up underneath the streetlight. And they're like, that's weird. It's probably like a creepy kid. He's going to kill us. Wouldn't that be funny? And they're like laughing. Because they just think it's weird. They honestly are making jokes that, I wonder if that's a ghost. I wonder if that's a ghost. Well, they get about 40 feet away. And they see the little boy. He's all checking his watch. He's like, I probably shouldn't have waited. I shouldn't have manifested so early. I've been manifesting this whole time. Tony and his friend are getting closer to the street light. The little boy standing underneath it, about 40 feet away. The little boy at this moment, he'd been, I guess, pretty still. You would think it was a trick of the light, especially if it's not moving. But once Tony and his friend get close, the boy turns and walks into the shadows. So, like, walking out of the street lamp. And once he does, the boy turns into a big, shaggy hound dog. Now, what's interesting? I'm looking at it, I go, then what happened? Did the dog run away? Did the kids run away? What happened? They just saw him turn into a dog. I'm assuming... Well, here's the thing. If I saw this in real life, I'm not going to be like, boring. That's all? The dog just sitting there. It's like, I'm a werewolf. I just turned in from a little boy into this big dog. Yeah, but like, are you going to run away or like do something? Right? I don't know. Then I'm trying to get hitchhiked. I'm all like, at least if a serial killer picks me up, that'll be exciting. So is there something about this? What's interesting is these are all stories from different people. These are all stories. They are all posted online by different people. We have the location of one of them. We talked about it last week. This idea of why do ghosts peek around corners? I find a lot of stories like that. My grandmother herself had a story like that. Ghost was peeking around corners. It's a transitional space, hallways and corners. And when you go through a doorway and now you're in a different room, it's a transitional space, and how ghosts transition. Ghosts are basically stuck in a transition from life to death. There's 100 different types of ghosts. I'm talking very generally here. I wonder if that's the case here as well, and I wonder if the transitional space can kind of apply to all sorts of paranormal activity. From light to darkness, that is a transition. Outside of the symbolism of it, does it actually help the paranormal to work in those nooks and valleys of reality? Think about it. Is it easier for a ghost to appear in your bedroom? Or for a ghost to appear underneath your bed? Because it's more of a, the room is the room. You're laying in bed. There's a ghost at the foot of your bed. Terrifying, right? But is it easier for them, the transitional space between your bed and the floor? Like, Jason... Now you're really stretching it, but my point is that we do have ghostly encounters down hallways. And there is something, too, that we all have this instinctive fear about walking up the basement steps. If the steps have those gaps in them, because we're always afraid somebody's going to reach out and grab our ankles. Even though, has that ever happened to you? It's never happened to me, ever. And it doesn't have to be basement stairs. Anytime you're walking up stairs that are spaced and there's nothing behind them but darkness, like someone could stand in that darkness and reach out and grab your ankle, that is a universal fear. Ever since stairs were invented, the guy who invented them went, uh-oh, uh-oh, this is going to make a lot of people scared. And those transitional spaces between one floor and the other, the area behind the stairs, I think there's something to it. We haven't nailed it down exactly, but the reason why this is important, and then we'll move on to our next story, is that the whole idea, I don't try to prove ghosts exist to anybody, because that's kind of a fool's errand. You're never really going to prove it. You're never going to have the right, unless they get possessed, right? You don't want them to get possessed. They're all killing you with a knife. You're like, I told you, demons exist. Cutting your eyeballs out. But if you could, we're always trying to replicate hauntings, and you kind of want to replicate them in a humane way. I'm doing the Port Gamble Ghost Conference this weekend, November 8th through the 10th in Port Gamble, Washington, portgamble.com for more information. But Pete Orbea is the head of that, and his big thing, his big movement is ghosts were people too, or ghosts are people too. And we shouldn't be provoking them just, to provoke them. You walk in a house, you're like, if you're really here, if the ghost is really here, I want you to punch my cameraman. I want you to punch him right in the nuts. The cameraman's like, what? Oh, and he's like, yes, I have proof. I have proof that I have proof my cameraman's never going to have children, and that ghosts exist. We see a lot of ghost shows like that. My point being is, what if we could more easily replicate hauntings by creating these conditions? Like, if you go into a haunted house, instead of walking all around the house, focus on those liminal spaces. Focus on those transitory areas. There you go. There's a lot of haunting in this room. and a lot of haunting in this room, but maybe focus on the hallway connecting them. You might pull up something or recreate the street lamp type of situation. Now the thing is like the street lamp thing, these things could not be ghosts at all. And if the transitional theory is correct, it would apply to even more paranormal events. The kids turning into dogs. We don't know where that story took place, right? If those two stories also took place in Arizona, well, I mean, then we have a reason to never visit Arizona. We don't know where the other stories took place. Is this happening more often and people aren't reporting it, or people just aren't seeing it? Because again, if you drove by and you saw the kid standing on the light and you didn't think anything of it, you wouldn't turn around to look and see the dog walking away. So interesting story. It kind of plays with that whole transitional theory I have. Let's see if we can find some more stuff like that, because this might be something you could actually recreate. You might be able to summon a ghost or create some sort of paranormal activity by recreating I'm not recommending you do that, just to be clear. I'm not recommending you do that. But even the crossroads, actually, that's a big symbol in summoning demons. That truly is like in the middle of the crossroads. That is a transitional space. 4 options to go, 4 different ways, but you're in the center there. So this might actually end up being something that we can actually sink our teeth into. Maybe the transitional spaces is the key to truly unlocking at least one of the mysteries of the paranormal, i.e., why they appear, where they appear. Andrea, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world famous carpenter copter. We are leaving behind this street light with all these kids and these dogs, and they're all running around having a big party. We're leaving them all behind. Andrea, fire up the carpenter copter. Take us all the way out to North Carolina. We're headed all the way out to North Carolina, specifically Grays Creek Township, North Carolina. The year is 1990. And first off, shout out to the last 747. They're the ones who sent this story over to me, as well as a pretty interesting theory about it. Let's take a look at this. We're about to meet a pizza delivery driver. Let's call him Chuck. He's doing noble work for a noble day's wage. I used to be a pizza delivery driver. There's a story or stories I would like to tell you about my days as a pizza delivery driver. I'm just trying to work out the what's that thing where if you break a law and if you wait long enough, what is that? The statute of limitations? Like, what is it? What is it for pizza related mayhem? Because I was doing it back in the late 90s. I don't want to give any lawyers any real number, because then they'll go, oh, that explains that. My client, blah, 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 blah. Like, at what point can I tell you about being the bad boy of the pizza game? I drove around on a Harley, had a leather jacket that said pizza for life. People knew that then when I was delivering their pizza, okay, I can't say anything more than that. My lawyer is shaking his head at me. Okay, buddy, I won't say anything more. Chuck, though, delivery driver, one of the highest callings anyone can answer. On this particular night, he's delivered a pizza pie to a family. They're waving goodbye to him. They're like, bye, Chuck. He's like, see you guys later. Wait, actually, I will. Did I ever tell this story? This story won't get me in trouble. This story was just immensely sad. I remember, I didn't go to high school out in this area, but all my buddies went to high school out in this area. This is in Antelope, Rio Linda. They went to high school in Antelope. They'd hate it if I even insinuated they went to high school in Rio Linda. But anyways, I was a pizza delivery driver, and I got a call to this address in the middle of Rio Linda, which is a really, really poor part of Sacramento. I mean, like, it was just downtrodden. I mean, if you had a mobile home, you were considered Scrooge McDuck. Every yard was completely dilapidated. Houses were crumbling in on each other. It wasn't that bad, but it felt that bad. Whenever I had to get gas out in that area, I was like, oh, great. I feel like I'm going to get a pitchfork in my back. It was very rural, very poor. And I remember I was driving out to do this delivery. It was a normal delivery, but I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten this because it was so heartbreaking. You're like, Jason, tell the story about the spooky thing. Anyways, I got my pizza order, and I had never delivered to this house before. Because you would start to, some people order pizzas pretty regularly. You'd start to, know people and faces, things like that. I remember I was driving through this neighborhood. It's probably like 5, 6 in the afternoon, early evening. And I think it was an order of a couple pizzas. I think it was like 2 or 3 pizzas. And I pull up to the house. And I see, for the first time, this was in the late 90s. And I'm not saying this story to make fun of them. Okay? You're like, oh no, Jason. I see the most obese people I've ever seen in real life. Then and now. So even now, like, because in 2024, like 20% of the U.S. population is considered obese. This was in the late 90s. These are the biggest people I'd ever seen before. And it was a whole family. It was like, I'm going to guess, it was a mom, an aunt. They kind of looked alike. And then a young man who wasn't much older than I was. We might have actually been the same age. And they were all just huge. And they're sitting, they have picnic tables in their front yard. 2, I can guarantee, stolen picnic tables. That would be a sight to see. Forget a monster standing underneath a street lamp. You see, you see this giant family carrying home picnic tables, Joe. Okay, so here's the thing. See, I always had this thing because I'm overweight. Technically, I'm obese. I'll wear that. As someone who's obese, you should never get caught stealing food or food-related things. I'm not a thief by trade. I'm not going to say that I've never ever stolen, but I can guarantee you I've never stolen food or anything food-related. You're not going to catch me stealing a blender or stealing, a bag of oatmeal or whatever. It's already cooked. I'm eating it for protein so I can run away quicker. If you're overweight, never get caught stealing food. I remember I was at a NASCAR race and I was stealing stuff. Okay, this story's really gone off the rails. I was at a NASCAR race and I was stealing stuff. I don't remember what I was stealing, but as we were leaving, we were walking by these big promoter tents, like the Budweiser tent, where like they'd have people sitting, people they invited, all these different things, and I would poke my head in each one, and I'd kind of like, I wanted souvenirs, right? I wanted souvenirs that I didn't pay for, that belonged to somebody else. And I remember at a certain point I got brazen. I started just walking into the tents because the race is over. People are just kind of talking to each other. They're walking around. I was walking around the tent, and I think I took a headset. The next race, I'm like, Tony Stewart, keep going. He's like, well, the race hasn't even started yet. Oh, well, I hear it in my ear. No, I think I took a headset for, like, waiters or something like that. It wasn't for, like, announcers. It wasn't for the pit crew. And they also had this beautiful half-eaten cake. It was like a wedding cake. Because these are, like, fancy, it wasn't like box seats. They had these big tents. They had this beautiful cake. And I was hungry. I was hungry, right? But I remember looking at that cake and it was already pre-cut. It would have been the perfect crime. As I'm sliding the phone thing, as I'm sliding the headset into my pocket, one of the people I was with, she goes, dude, that cake looks delicious. Why don't you get some of that cake? And I turned to her and I said what I just said to you. A fat man can never be caught stealing food. And I walked away, right? She's like, she thought about it. She's like, that's so true. Like, if you get caught stealing a headset, you're like, oh, sorry, I thought it was a waiter. I have occupational Alzheimer's. But you can't steal a cake. You can't steal food. But anyway, so I don't know if this family actually stole the picnic benches, but it would have been hilarious. But the story's not supposed to be hilarious. It's supposed to be sad. I'm walking up to this house. I see this family, this obese family. And I see this young man who's like close to my age, if not my age. And I would have been 21, 22, somewhere around there. And I'm walking up to them. They're all sitting down at the picnic table. I'm walking up to them with 3 piping hot Godfather pizzas. And they are eating pizza already. Each of them had a pizza in front of them that was about half eaten. I was the backup pizzas. I was the next course in their meal. Not me, literally. I'm all in the oven. I'm like, let me out. I'll never tell anyone. I'll never tell anyone. And not me, but my pizzas. And I thought, I remember just felt so bad for that young man. I was like, I'm giving them, I mean, they paid for them, right? It wasn't doing charity work, but I thought, wow. They're eating pizza right now, and when they're done with those pizzas, they're going to eat these pizzas. And when they're done with these pizzas, they're going to eat me. While running away. I'm quit. I'm never going back. I remember thinking, what a horrible addiction. Because at that point, there's no other way to classify it. Now, here's the thing. We've all eaten one pizza. You have, I have. We've all eaten one pizza at some point in our lives, but have you ever eaten 2 in one sitting? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying you got 2 pizzas and you saved one for tomorrow. We've all had a long night of gaming, eating a whole pizza. But, I mean, I couldn't do 2. There's no way, and these were large. By the way, they weren't mini, they weren't tiny little pizzas. And I remember taking the pizzas in, and honestly, like, I felt like a drug dealer dropping off some heroin. That might be a little exaggerating, but I mean, if you've ever been like in a situation where drugs are openly used and you go to someone's house and there's a kid there, that's what it kind of felt like to me. Not that order of magnitude, but I thought, this young guy was raised in this household by people who are at the very least addicted to food. There's no other way to put it. How many people can eat 2 pizzas in the afternoon? It's not even like it was the Super Bowl. It wasn't even like it was some big occasion. It was like Friday, Saturday, 5 p.m. And what's funny was that I really felt super bad for this guy. The women had made their choices. They were probably as old as I am now, maybe a little bit younger, maybe in their 30s. No, probably been close to their 40s because what happened was I felt really bad for the dude. The mother, whichever one it was, they all kind of looked the same. I think it was a mom and aunt and a whatever, I don't remember, because I really wasn't focused on them. I was focused on where did the picnic table come from. That was something I did wonder as well. And this poor young man. So I dropped the pizzas off, and I left. They were licking their lips. They're like, why don't you stay around, young man? We have some candy in our house. Which I don't believe that. That'd be the worst lie they could ever tell. I was like, oh, you almost caught me there. But I can guarantee you, if there was candy in that house, you guys already ate it as I'm running back to my car. I get back to Godfather's Pizza, which is where I worked at the time, and I was like, oh my God, I was like delivering alcohol to a drunk. It was like the worst thing. And a buddy of mine who worked at Godfather's Pizza knew the house, knew who I was talking about, and he knew that young man. They went to high school together. They weren't friends, but from what I remember, he knew the young man through, like, just reputation, word of mouth. Speaking of which, he's all, all this stuff. No, I'm not going to make fat jokes. My point is that he said, yeah. He goes, everyone makes fun of that guy because he's so obese. Which, I mean, I wasn't like, well, I'm shocked. What? It was a different time back then. People made fun of everybody. But I felt so bad. He, like, in school had a reputation of being obese, which would be kind of hard to not have that reputation if you're 400 pounds. But it's like, you can be 400 pounds and be known the guy at high school, the funny guy. or the artistic guy, or the guy who got his hand chopped off in wood class. But no, he was the guy who ate all the time. He was the big, fat high school dude. And now we're all graduated from high school, and he's just the big, fat dude. He's not in high school anymore, who's eating 2 pizzas in the middle of the day with his family that's eating 2 pizzas. And I just thought, that's so sad. It was depressing. It depressed me then, and it depresses me now. And I hope he figured it out. I hope he stopped having a food addiction and worked out his body and his mind to get out of that pit. Otherwise, he probably had a heart attack 3 years ago. So anyways, on to this story. You're like, oh man. Y'all Googling fattest kid at Center High, late 90s. Anyways, I hope he's doing okay. I never delivered a pizza to that address again, either. Not by choice. Apparently they did order all the time. I just lucked out. And they continued to order after that. Anyways, we're in Grace Creek Township, North Carolina. Chuck is driving the pizzas around. And he's driving his truck, right? Driving by. Cars driving past him. He's driving. And then all of a sudden, he hears a huge thud in the back of his truck. But it's not that he just takes him a really hard time. You're all thinking about the super obese 20-year-old. You're like, what happened to that guy? I know. I was like, but anyways, let's talk about a monster man. Let me get back. Let me focus. You can tell I was just like, cars driving by. Just making the lazy sound effects. Okay, give me a second here. Okay, Chuck's driving. He's on the pizza delivery route. All of his pizzas have been delivered. He's headed back home, and that's when he hears this loud thud in the back of his pickup truck. But it's not so much that he just heard it. He felt it. He actually felt the weight of the truck shift. Because something massive must have just landed in the back of his truck. He looks back. To see what it is, and he could never have even come close to what he thought. It was a big fat guy from Rio Linda. No, just joking. He couldn't even come close to picturing what it was. It was a monster. You're out doing your job. You've done this route multiple times before. You never even seen anything remotely terrifying, and now you're under attack. Something evil, something dark and powerful is in the back of your truck. He looks back and he sees this thing, and he describes it as completely black, massive, over 7 feet tall, and its face was filled with murderous rage. This giant beast, who we don't get a lot of description of. We don't get a lot of descriptors of the thing, but Chuck can clearly see this beast's face, and it wants to kill him. He knows more than anything this creature wants to kill Chuck any way that he can. The creature roars, and then crawls out of the truck bed and stood there on the side of the road. Chuck hits the gas pedal and speeds off, leaving the monster alone. Chuck gets back to the pizza parlor, and he opens his truck door, goes to get out, and he feels his knees buckle. He has no strength whatsoever in him. He can't even stand up. He's gasping for air. He can't breathe. He's sitting there in his truck. The owner comes out. Probably some customers will be like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but it seems like your delivery driver's about to die. He's barely standing up. He's gasping for air. The owner of the pizzeria comes out and sees Chuck, sees how badly shook up Chuck is, or something's going on, right? He can't stand up, he's breathing really heavily. He doesn't have any idea what happened. The owner wants to take Chuck to the hospital, and Chuck's like, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. I just need to go home. I don't feel good. Can I go home? And the owner goes, yeah, sure, Chuck, go ahead. I mean, you need someone to drive you home? His legs are all wobbly. Yeah, you can go home early. Later on, like I don't think a great deal of time later, the next day, maybe the next night, Chuck ends up telling this story to both his father and his boss, saying, hey, I can't believe this. I was driving on my normal route and this thing, to Chuck's best knowledge, this thing must have fallen out of a tree. He goes, I don't know how it would have gotten in the back of my truck bed and fall with the force that it did. I'm assuming it fell out of a tree. Landed in my truck bed and was staring at me, terrified me, started roaring, all that stuff. Well, both his father and his boss, I mean, it's a bizarre story. There was physical evidence, though, that helped persuade them that what Chuck saw is what he really saw. They said in his truck bed, you could tell that it had been damaged. You could tell something heavy had landed into the truck bed. They found blood in the truck bed. They found tufts of hair. And it had a terrible odor. So I don't know if he's like, oh, I gotta go back to work, throw the pizzas in the truck bed. Let's deliver all these pizzas tonight. This story was posted on Phantoms and Monsters, a great website by Lon Strickler. Lon Strickler seems to think that this creature was a Bigfoot. 7 foot tall. I think there is a point where they reference, I don't ever think they say that the creature was covered in hair, but because the hair was found in the pickup cab, in the truck, the back of the truck, the flatbed, that it's Bigfoot related. That's what his theory was. I don't necessarily think it's a Bigfoot. There's a lot of things out there that have hair, that are big. Bigfoots aren't known for climbing trees, let alone falling out of them, but it could have been a Bigfoot. Because really, it could have been nothing. And this is where it gets weird, and this is the last 747's theory, and I think it's an actually pretty valid theory, and if it's true, has some terrifying implications for all of us. Chuck said that this creature landed in the back of his pickup truck, stared at him with hate-fueled violence in his eyes, really wanted to kill Chuck, roared, crawled out of the truck bed. Chuck speeds off. The next thing Chuck knows, he's at the pizza parlor. His car's in the parking lot. And he can't stand. His legs are too weak. He's breathing heavily. He doesn't remember anything from leaving this monster on the side of the road all the way back to work. Which we don't know what the distance was, but there was a distance. Whether it was a mile or 10 miles, there was a distance in between where he was when he saw this thing, or felt it really, and saw it, and then him ending up at the parking lot. And the last 747 says that this could be what is called a screen memory. They're most notable with alien abduction, where you will get abducted by an alien and they will create false memories for you to remember, so you don't remember being abducted by an alien. So you may have a dream that you're in an operating room, and you have this dream where they are taking out your appendix, or some made-up organ, right? Because it's just a dream. They're taking out your flibble. And when you wake up, maybe you do feel a little bit soreness in your back, and you're like, oh, that was a weird dream. They're taking out my flibble, and now where the flibble's at, it kind of hurt, but it was just a dream. You go about your day. You go about your life. You don't know that they actually implanted something in or took a previous implant out. They've created a screen memory. You didn't dream it. It actually happened, but they turned it into something else. This is where a lot of missing time comes from. But it's almost like you get abducted and then they just blank out everything. So to you, you've lost 2 hours of time. But, well, to you, only 5 minutes have passed. That's what it feels like. But really, 2 hours have passed. You have this lost time. You have these screen memories. We do see some of it also in mind control type programs. Sometimes, I'm not a big believer in the super soldier program, but obviously governments working with mind control, that is documented. We know that governments have done that and continue to do that. Continuing to do that's conspiracy theory. I believe it, but it's conspiracy theory. We definitely know MK Ultra was real. It was discovered in congressional documents. It was shut down, supposedly. You create a screen memory. So you can take someone and torture them or break their mind, but they don't remember that. You put something else. See, the thing with lost time is actually a defect of being abducted by aliens. It's almost like they're not doing it right. Because if you were abducted and it felt like 5 minutes and then you find out later that 2 hours had passed, you get home and your wife's like, what were you doing out so late? What were you doing out so late? And you're like, oh, what is, you're bleeding from your eyeballs? Your flibbles been removed? You're like, listen, lady, give me a little bit of peace and quiet. I just got abducted by aliens. When you notice that there's been a time loss, that's when you start to question, well, what happened then? And then you go to a hypnotist or have regression hypnosis performed and you find out you're abducted by aliens. If the aliens were actually able to create a screen memory that stuck, that worked, you would remember driving down the road and then seeing a new restaurant on the side of the road and you go, oh, I've heard great things about this restaurant. You pull in and you have a delicious meal and everybody's like having fun and they all like, dude, you're the best. You're totally awesome. You're like, oh, thanks. And then you leave, you drive away and 2 hours have passed. 2 hours have passed. 2 hours have passed in the real world. You would never get hypnosis done to figure out what happened in those 2 hours because you remembered you went to that new restaurant. So that's how it's supposed to work. Aliens don't seem to be the best at any of this. I don't know why I'm giving them tips. I'm like, if you want to conquer Earth, here's how. But this idea of a screen memory, and what it is that you're because this is what the last 747's putting out, and I think this is a great theory as well. Something happened to Chuck on that road that his memory has been wiped. His memory's been completely wiped. Because to go from here to here and he doesn't remember driving there. To this day doesn't remember driving there. What happened in that period of time? Let's say the shortest distance is a mile in this story. He drove a mile, doesn't know what happened. You could say he was so panicked he didn't know. But he didn't even say, I just drove down the street in a blind panic. It's also possible that we even go back further, that not only did he experience something that his mind was erased, that the actual beast falling in the back of the truck was the beginning of the false memory. That was fake too. That never happened. The monster falls in the back of the truck, it terrifies him, it does damage to the truck. He looks back, he sees it, the creature looks at it like it wants to kill him, and then he crawls out of the back, lets out a roar, Chuck drives away. All of that stuff is actually made up in his mind to hide something even scarier. It's all a false memory. It's a screen memory. Sometimes people can make up their own memories when they've suffered a traumatic event. It could have been voluntary, kind of like subconsciously on his part. It could have also been... See, this is the interesting thing. You can start to look at Chuck got abducted by an alien. And what happened aboard that ship or in that, sometimes there's bases on Earth, wherever, interdimensional aliens, whatever. He gets abducted, and what happened to him there was so horrific that if they gave him a false memory of a nice, happy drive all the way back to the pizza parlor, his soul would shatter. He experienced something that was so inhuman that the fake memory must also include elements of inhumanity. Because then if he just thought he had a great drive and he never experienced anything, he gets abducted by aliens, they give him a false memory of him continuing his drive. He ends up at the parking lot outside the pizzeria and his legs don't work and he's breathing heavily. and he looks like he's about to have a heart attack, that wouldn't make any sense. So the fake memory had to include implied violence from a brutal, powerful foe. It's fake. But it had to be this scary to match what he actually went through in this other event. Now, what's interesting is there is the physical evidence left here. The damage to the cab, the blood, and the hair. But again, like, did that come from this beast? Or did it possibly come from Chuck? Or somebody else? The hair was never tested. The blood was never tested. It was just damage to the truck. Was that also, like, if during this abduction, successful abduction, really, because he does have this period of not necessarily missing, well, yeah, it would be missing time, because he doesn't remember this chunk of time. During this abduction event, the vehicle itself got damaged. So again, the screen memory had to account for that. And you go, Jason, okay, this is an interesting theory. I thought so. Last 747 came up with it. It's a super interesting theory. You go, shouldn't we see more of this, though? Like, why you talk about aliens not really doing false memories right? I mean, like, why would they get this one right? And I started to think that maybe they get it right more often than we think. What if, when you do wake up in the middle of the night and there's the ghost of a little girl standing at the foot of your bed and it terrifies you and you reach over and you turn on your lamp real quickly and it's gone and you find yourself having a hard time catching your breath? That didn't happen. Not from a skeptical point of view, saying that you imagined it all, but what actually happened is you were abducted by aliens while you were sleeping, which would make the idea of lost time completely non-consequential. Most people who are abducted by aliens find out that something is wrong because they are missing time. They cannot account for 2 or 4 hours of their day, and they're having real trouble with it. It's not like when you're driving down the road and they call it highway blindness, where you just you've made the trip 100 times before, whatever. This is, you were abducted by aliens during your sleep. And the event was so traumatic that when you were returned to Earth, there is a traumatic trigger to explain why you wake up and your heart's beating fast, you can't catch your breath, you saw a ghost, you feel uneasy, you feel scared. But those are the same feelings, both emotional and physical, that you were having 3 minutes ago in an alien laboratory. So if they just transitioned you from abduction back into your room and you're freaking out like that, you're going to wonder, what was that? You're going to go to the doctor. You're going to say, I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what it was. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding super fast. I was terrified. I don't know. The doctor might be able to diagnose you as, panic attack. That's what it sounds like. Or the doctor, they may not have a good answer for that. And you might start to question it and go, what's going on? Why did that happen? And then you may uncover the truth in a roundabout way. But if you woke up and you saw that ghost girl standing at the foot of your bed, first off, you're not telling your doctor. Maybe a shrink if you think you're going crazy, but you're not going to go to the doctor for that. You're going to be terrified. You may not tell anyone that. You may not admit to anyone that you saw a ghost in your house. But you didn't see a ghost in your house. It was actually a cover for an alien abduction. I'm not saying that every paranormal event is like that. It may be a minuscule amount. But I think some of them might be. Because it really would make sense. We have a combination between families living in a haunted house and they're all experiencing ghostly activity. And a lot of times alien abductions can involve one member of a household or all the members of the household. Could be multi-generational alien abductions. And so we do have this crossover. The same way that a ghost would haunt a particular house, An alien would study a particular family. Now, I mean, again, I think that there's so many different types of ghosts. There's ghosts you can interact with, and then there's ghosts that you just see, and there's ghosts that you just feel. I think it would be really hard to set a percentage saying this amount of ghosts are actually screen memories from aliens. I would say if I couldn't even give you a percentage. I would imagine it would be incredibly small. But if you think about it, that is a perfect workaround. Because even being abducted, I mean, again, just that is a negative thing. There's very few friendly kidnappings. You have stories of farmers getting on spaceships and eating space pancakes. Or what was that one guy doing in New York? He was like making flowers or something. I'll see if I can. That's one of my favorite episodes recently of Dead Rap Radio. It was like 300 episodes ago, but we have stories like that, but I'm talking about people just getting abducted. And while eventually they may learn the Space Brothers are here to help us out, like, that takes a while. And that's usually when you're walking aboard the ship. The people who get abducted, you're being taken against your will, and really, in this case, against your knowledge. And it is terrifying. And anytime someone comes in your house and steals you, you're going to have some bad nightmares. Or some just bad real mares. Right? You're not asleep. They're doing stuff to you. So you got to cover that up somehow. And what if the somehow is fake paranormal stories? A lot of alien abductions happen at night. Not all of them, but a lot of alien abductions happen at night. A lot of ghostly encounters, especially the more personal ones where the ghosts are interacting with you, happen at night. Ghostly encounters tend to be restricted to a particular area. A house, or a field, or a church, something like that, some sort of structure. Not all the time, but usually. A stretch of road with a phantom hitchhiker. That doesn't... I was trying to think alien encounters can be anywhere. I see even my own theory stretching out, it could be anything. But anyway, I think it's interesting food for thought. I can't say for a fact that it's true, but maybe some of them are. And if that's the case, you really have to wonder, what did Chuck go through that was so terrifying that the only thing they could replace it with was a massive 7-foot-tall monster falling into the back of his truck? And again, that actually is a good question, that it's coming from above. That doesn't really make sense anyways, that this creature would be up in the tree. What branch could hold this thing? Fall into the back of the truck. So maybe he was abducted, or any other host of paranormal events. It could have been dragged to hell by 1,000 demons. You know what I mean? Like, we can go anywhere with that. But sticking with the alien abduction thing, you have to imagine, what could he have gone through that was so horrifying that this was the happy memory for him? The snarling creature just inches away from his head, ready to kill him, ready to rip his guts out. This image was preferable to what Chuck actually went through. Terrifying, terrifying stuff. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is at DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today.